It's time for The Verdict. The Verdict is a lively discussion of current events and legal issues pertinent to Oklahomans. The Verdict is hosted by Kent Myers and Mick Cornett. It's time for The Verdict.
Hello again and welcome to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett. My co-host is Kent Myers. Every week we're here to discuss topical issues, and this week, one that's right on the front burner.
And affects all of us, no matter what our situation might be. That is the high cost of prescription drugs that we buy over the counter here through our pharmacies in Oklahoma and in the United States. And the problem is brought into focus by the fact that this same drug that we're buying in Oklahoma might be available to us on the internet or by going to Canada and buying it at a much cheaper price. Some people ask the question, how in the world can the manufacturers manufacture the drug here, sell it to Canada at a much cheaper price than they sell it here, and yet the U.S. citizens are hindered in trying to bring this drug back in through going to Canada or getting it over the internet. There are all kinds of concerns about that, safety concerns, advice concerns about how you mix one drug with another, and we've got a fellow here who can talk about all of these things.
No doubt we'll know more about the marketing and sale of prescription drugs at the end of the show than we know right now. We'll get to it right after this. You're watching The Verdict. Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce our guest.
Today we're very pleased to have Mark Dodson, the president of the Oklahoma Pharmacists Association, joining us. He has made a long trip from Altus, Oklahoma to be with us today, and we appreciate it. A little bit about Mark. He comes from a family of pharmacists. His father is a pharmacist, as is his wife. He is a native of Altus, Oklahoma, where he practices pharmacy. He obtained his DPH from the Southwestern Oklahoma State University in 1989. He has been in the practice of pharmacy since then. He is a member of the Board of Regents of Western Oklahoma State College. I almost said Southwestern. It's Western Oklahoma State College in Altus. And Mark, thank you for making the long trip to come up and talk to us about these interesting pharmacy issues.
Okay, thank you very much for having me, Ken.
I think this is the main issue, Mark, and the principal part of this show is why can someone purchase a drug in Canada? A U.S.-based drug company produces a product, it's sold for less there than it is here. Why is that?
Okay, quite simply, the reason is Canada institutes price controls over the pharmaceuticals that the Canadian citizens use. Canada goes directly to the pharmaceutical manufacturers and negotiates the price, and if they reach a favorable price with the manufacturers, then they'll include that particular price on their Canadian national formulary.
So the Canadian government gets right in the middle of what we in the United States would call free enterprise and imposes price controls, and that enables Canadian citizens to buy drugs cheaper than U.S. citizens can, even though they're made here in the United States.
Absolutely.
And now you have U.S. citizens who are traveling across the border, some on sponsored tourism ventures, principally to buy drugs that they import across the border.
Right.
And is all that legal? I mean, can you go over there to buy drugs and then come back legally and bring them across the border?
It is legal if you go over there and you purchase those drugs for personal use only. Now, it's important to make the distinction, though, that you are just getting probably 40 or 50 drugs at a reduced price in Canada. Those are the ones that they have negotiated the discounts with the manufacturers on. For instance, if you go over there to purchase a generic pharmaceutical, the prices in Canada are higher for generics than they are in the United States. So it's only a short list of the drugs that are on that formulary that you can get cheaper in Canada.
Now, can you use government subsidies, U.S. government subsidies to buy? In other words, could I use Medicaid? Could I use a state-issued some sort of voucher to go up to Canada to purchase my drugs? Okay.
No, this is just cash purchases.
Okay.
Well, a little related question. You are in the pharmacy business, you do it every day. You said there are 40 or 50 drugs that are negotiated by Canada. How many drugs do you carry in your pharmacy? that can be bought on a prescription basis?
Oh, Ken, we have, I would say probably thousands.
So out of the thousands that are available and might be needed, only a few are covered by those price controls.
Right, but they tried to do a good job in selecting their formulary to get the newest, the most innovative drugs that the Canadian citizens would be requiring.
And the one in highest demand.
Yeah. Right, the highest demand.
What about internet sales of drugs? Does that work here across the border the same way?
Well, internet sales, it just depends on where you're getting your medicine. If you're using an internet sale to get the medicine from a Canadian pharmacy, then that is okay. You're going to get good, safe medicines that's been inspected by Canada's version of the FDA.
Will they be cheaper?
More than likely, yes. But now if you're getting over the internet, you're getting prescriptions from maybe somebody who spammed you that's not coming from a Canadian pharmacy, then those medications are probably going to be counterfeit.
Let the buyer beware.
The buyer must beware.
During the recent U.S. Senate race, Dr. Tom Coburn frequently brought up the amount of money that he said Oklahomans spent on prescription drugs. We have a graphic, I think, that kind of gives some of that information. But I think he said the number was $582 each. And he was saying that that was basically high. I think it's the 10th highest in the nation as we look at the graphic. So what would you say about that? Why are we 10th? And you see some of the states in the south and east of us, but primarily south, might have a lower rate. But Texas, for instance, is 30th. Why would we pay more per person than Texas?
Okay, now that particular number is going to make more sense if you look also at the number of uninsured Oklahomans. We have 600,000 uninsured citizens in Oklahoma. Also, if you look at the per capita income of Oklahomans, we're going to be about 10th lowest on per capita income. Also, if you look at Oklahomans living under the federal poverty level, we're going to be about the 10th highest there.
So we have less money. So we have less money to spend on prescription
Right.
drugs.
Quite simply, it boils down to the people with higher incomes, with better paying jobs, who have insurance, are going to get better health care. The uninsured people are going to be the ones who are left out in the cold in this deal. They're going to be paying higher prices for pharmaceuticals because they don't have the insurance, and they're the ones who are getting the short end of the stick on this deal.
Well, we've done several shows here on The Verdict on health issues, and it seems like Oklahomans are not very healthy as a group, particularly in comparison to some of our neighbors. It seems like our neighbors to the west and north seem to be healthier than our neighbors to the east, and we're kind of there in the middle. I presume the debt burden on an individual buying prescriptions is to some extent affected by how many that person needs, how sick they are. That would raise our number, would it not?
Right. Plus, you need to look at the Oklahoma has a very high prevalence of smoking, and that also is a great contributor to that number. We should bring up also that Oklahoma has seen these numbers, and we're doing a lot to take care of this. Just in the past couple of years, the Oklahoma legislature has passed a couple of bills that are, it would be nice to note. The Pharmacy Connection program is a group, a coalition of pharmacists that get together and help low-income Oklahomans find medicine that is given away by the drug companies. They have programs for indigent people, and the Pharmacy Connection gets together and tries to find these medicines and disseminate them to the low-income Oklahomans. Also, we passed I forget right now the name of the act, but it's the where you can go into nursing homes and where the nursing home patient may have passed away or the medication has been discontinued by the physician. That medication was previously just dumped. It was thrown away. It was destroyed. Well, now Oklahoma has passed a law that's saying we can send all those unused medication to a central depot, and the Oklahoma State Board of Pharmacy is responsible for disseminating that out to low-income Oklahomans. And that's going to do a great job in lowering the cost and the out-of-pocket payments for low-income Oklahomans.
Mark, I've heard the phrase pharmacy benefit manager. Tell me, what is a pharmacy benefit manager?
Okay, now these are large corporations. There's 3 primary pharmacy benefit managers, and we refer to them as PBMs. You've got Medco, Express Scripts, and Caremark. And these companies, Let's take, for instance, they would go around to a large employer, let's say Mick, since he employs a lot of people. They would come and they would put a slick sales presentation onto you, and they would say, okay, since you are responsible for covering the health care benefits and the prescription benefits for a large number of employees, that's going to be a logistical nightmare for you and the city of Oklahoma City to take care of on their own. So what we're going to do is we're going to take care of that for you. We're going to go to the pharmacies and the providers, and we're going to negotiate low reimbursement rates. We're going to keep the prices down by negotiating these rates with the providers, and we're going to use formularies. We're going to try to drive those customers to one particular product, and by doing that, we're going to go to the manufacturers and say, since we're bringing you all this business, we want to rebate back of some of that business that we're giving to you. Mm-hmm. So in actuality, when these PBMs get this business, the rebates that we're finding that they are getting back from the manufacturers, they're taking these rebates and they're relabeling them, and they're keeping the vast majority of these rebates, and they're not passing them on to the plan sponsors. And the negotiated rates that they're negotiating with the providers aren't really negotiations at all. They're take it or leave it contracts. Say they would come to my pharmacy and say, Mark, if you want to fill prescriptions for the city of Oklahoma City, you will fill it for this rate. And if you don't accept that, when we'll go down to Walmart or Walgreens and they'll take it.
Okay. And that was hypothetical, by the way.
Well, that's pretty much how it happens.
Yeah.
And these people are really, since they're keeping these rebates and they're not really passing them back to the plan sponsors, they're making tons of money. And they're really not providing any unique value to the healthcare delivery system in America today.
We'll be right back. We're learning about prescription drugs in the United States. Why do they cost so much, and why do Oklahomans use so much? Welcome back to The Verdict. We're learning more about prescription drugs. Our guest is Mark Dodson. Kent, where do you want to go from here?
Safety. Mark, what are your concerns about the safety of the drugs that may be imported from Canada or elsewhere? Do you have some reason to suspect that from time to time the drugs aren't really safe that these U.S. consumers are buying?
Yes, absolutely. I think now would probably be a good time to differentiate between the terms import and re-import.
Okay.
Reimportation of drugs simply means that you're taking a drug that was manufactured by an American facility and sent to a foreign country such as Canada and then imported back into the United States. Now, there are no concerns whatsoever with any of the pharmacists about the quality of these drugs because they're all FDA approved and they've been inspected quite thoroughly. Now, on the other hand, the imported drugs are drugs which are manufactured in a foreign country, maybe even a third world country, which are not inspected by the FDA and that are sent directly to American consumers. And we have a lot of concerns with the safety of those particular products. I just read a study recently that said last year they feel like 100,000 people in China died as a result of counterfeit drugs. So this is a problem. Once we start, if we ever start okaying importing drugs, then counterfeit drugs and fake medicine is going to be a huge issue. We haven't got there yet, but it is looming on the horizon.
One other concern I think that your group has, and that is how, well, if I come to you and get a prescription filled, you're going to know what other prescriptions presumably I'm using, and you'll know how to tell me to take this drug in interaction with the other things I'm taking. Is that a concern when a consumer is just buying it over the internet?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the things that the pharmacists pride themselves on, is we have very extensive software built into our computers, and we're always screening the medications that you bring in that we fill in the local pharmacist against what's already in your database, in your profile. And, you know, if something if an interaction does occur, we're the first ones to say, hey, you need to watch out for this, or we'll call your doctor and let them know. Now, if you're getting a prescription that's coming from a different country, we have no idea of that medication. It's not going to be in your profile. So yeah, we have serious
And neither
concerns.
does the seller that's selling it.
No, and oftentimes neither will your local physician.
Yeah.
Well, we're all very much aware right now of what's going on. Drugs, prescription drugs, many of them are cheaper to purchase in Canada than they are in the United States. Same
Right.
drug. How's all this going to play out? Is this going to continue, or do you see somebody coming in and fixing what I will call a problem?
Well, ultimately, the ball is in the pharmaceutical manufacturer's court. And it's a supply and demand. The pharmaceutical manufacturers don't want Americans importing their medications from Canada simply because the profit margins aren't there. And if we start importing too much medicine from Canada, the pharmaceutical manufacturers are going to look at this and they're going to say to the Canadians, hey, we're not going to start selling you more and more medication just so you can turn around and sell it back to Americans at a cheaper price. So they're already starting to get a little tougher with this. They're saying, okay, based on historical levels of purchases, what you bought from us in the past, that's how much medicine we're going to send to you for this year, based on a certain percentage for growth. So it is a supply and demand issue. The Canadian pharmaceutical market is only at the most 10% of the size of the American pharmaceutical marketplace. So it's really probably not feasible for this to be the solution to our healthcare prices.
In a sense, are the United States consumers funding lower drug prices for people throughout the world?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That is part of the problem is there are price controls. This is a worldwide market, the pharmaceutical industry, and there are price controls on the pharmaceuticals in practically every other country except the United States. So we're paying more for our medications here at home than anybody else in the rest of the world. And if you look at the American marketplace as a whole, if you take that market and look at it, then the people inside America that have insurance, that have the good paying jobs, are paying less because the prices are being paid for by a third party. I'm referring to insurances. And that leaves the majority of the high prices being left to the poor and the uninsured and the elderly.
How do we reconcile this? In this state and in many places across this country, a lot of people subscribe to the idea that we ought to have less government, not more government. But here it seems, with the price controls being in place in many other jurisdictions around the world, is the only way we're going to fix this by having more government supervision here in the United States?
Well, there's two ways we can go here. We can either say, okay, since everybody else has price controls, then America can have price controls also. Well, the pharmaceutical industry will never stand for that. And they have a very big influential lobby in Washington, so the chances of that happening are probably pretty nil. And once you start proposing that, then the pharmaceutical manufacturers are going to say, that's going to do nothing but stifle innovation.
Yep.
So the other way we can go would be for us to approach the pharmaceutical manufacturers and say, hey, let's get tough with the rest of the world and let's buck up to those guys and say, we're not going to honor your price controls anymore. You either want the drug, you're going to get it for our price, and you're not going to beat us over the head and tell us what we're going to sell our products to you for. And that is kind of opening up the markets worldwide, creating a freer market worldwide. And I think that is where the answer comes. Let's let the other countries start paying for some of this and quit making our poor and uninsured pay the bulk of the price.
Okay, let me let you expand on that, because I think that's probably one of your messages, and I want you to be able to speak on behalf of your organization, which you're a spokesperson for. What's your message to Oklahomans on the issues that we've talked about on this show?
Okay, my message to Oklahomans is, this is all a political football that's being passed around. But the short-term solution, and my solution for Oklahomans, is to talk to your pharmacist. And if you go to a pharmacy that's too busy, or if you don't feel like your pharmacist has enough time to to speak with you about these issues, call the Oklahoma Pharmacists Association or call your local pharmacist. Make an appointment and sit down with him, because the pharmacist can provide some cost-effective solutions. They can set you up with a generic. You don't have to be taking Nexium, which costs $150 a month. There are other drugs, over-the-counter Prilosec you can get, which is virtually the same medicine for about $28 to $30 a month. And there are other instances, blood pressure medications, where the pharmacist can provide some cost-effective alternatives.
So ask questions, do a little homework, and you might be able to get a better deal.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. We appreciate you coming on the show.
Okay.
Thank you,
Nick.
Mark.
Thanks, Kent.
Kent and I will have a final word when we return. Welcome back to The Verdict. We've been learning more about prescription drugs. Kent?
Well, it'll be interesting to see if this session of the legislature takes this up and tries to do anything about it. There is, of course, the real disparity on our Oklahomans paying such a high burden, relatively speaking, for prescriptions as other United States citizens do in relation to their income and their wealth and all. And how do you solve that? The question can legitimately be asked, is the free enterprise system broken here insofar as the prescription drug segment is concerned? Does it need more government intervention? Some would say yes, some would say no. Time will tell, but I think we have learned a lot today about what the problem is and how potentially can be solved.
We like to give web information for those viewers who might want more information on today's show. The Oklahoma Pharmacists Association can be reached at opha.com. Kent and I'll see you next week. So long.